Hey, welcome to the party.
Let's have a back at the party moment. We are looking for a new way to see the world.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Back at the Party with Megan. This is my brand new podcast brought to you in partnership with my friends over at Zoda Pop. And if you're listening in via audio, we also have video versions available on Spotify and on YouTube, so you can join the party however you wish. Today we are recording the third episode, and we're going to be talking about a new way to see university. But I also think a lot of the contents in this episode are applicable to whatever stage of school you're in. So, take what you need and then leave the rest behind. And then you can join me at the back at the party. Okay, so before we get into all of that, let me give you guys a little bit of background. So I studied in NTU, that's Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. I did a 4 years course, bachelor's in social science, studying public policy and global affairs. I did a minor in sociology, and I just graduated in June 2022. So at the time of me recording this, it's not even been half a year since I graduated. So all these stories, all these experiences that you're hearing are going to be super fresh. I'm going to talk about 3 things. Number 1 will be how I found my uni course. Number 2 will be how I got through uni, like what was the mindset that I had while going through uni. Because I really enjoyed my time in university, and I feel like that's not a very common experience. I think a lot of times the common narrative that I hear from Singaporean students in uni is like, I just want to get the degree and get out of here. But I actually really enjoyed my time in uni. I was really sorry to leave. I was not sorry to get out of Pulau NTU. So I studied NTU. So the journey to school was 2 hours one way and then 2 hours back home. So sometimes my class would be 2 hours, but then I have to travel 4 hours for it. That really sucked. So I was very glad to leave NTU, but I was sorry to leave uni, I guess. And then the last part of the episode will be talking about how I paid off my uni fees. So let's just get right into it. So how I got to choosing my uni course and my school was actually kind of a funny story. So when I graduated from SOTA, I fully intended to take a gap year. I have an uncle that I'm really, really close to, and we were talking about like what I wanted to study in uni, and I just wasn't really sure. I think in the last episode, I kind of talked a little bit about wanting to study law at first. I didn't bring this up the last time, but I actually went to the NUS open house when I was 16 years old. So, that's actually a little bit insane, because I think most people go to open houses like when they're 18 or 19, like when you actually have to apply for university. I went like 2 or 3 years ahead of time, and I went alone because nobody wanted to go with me. But I just really wanted to check out the offerings at NUS, and then also find out a little bit more about NUS law. So I went when I was 16. I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. Like, I even got to sit in on this like moot court presentation that they had, which I thought was so fun. But then I did the internship at the law firm, and I was like, okay, I hate this. I'm not gonna do that. So after I gave up on my dream to be a lawyer, my dream in air quotes, I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. And my uncle was telling me, like, you shouldn't just go to uni for the sake of it. It's a really expensive investment. Go and work first. Try and like figure out what it is exactly that you want to do before you commit to like 4 years in a university and then like $40,000 in uni fees, right? Which I thought makes sense, right? Because after I did the law internship, that was when I realized like I don't want to study law. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna apply that same logic. I'm gonna go and like work and then decide what I want to do from there. I considered doing like a degree in theater. I was actually really interested in directing at the time. I mean, I still am, but at that point, I really wanted to do directing in the theater. But directing in the theater isn't really like a bachelor's degree that schools offer. It's usually an MA, like something a little bit more specialized. Would have to go through another 4 years of theater education in university, and I just didn't want to do that in Singapore, right? I wanted to kind of try it out somewhere else. So I was looking at other theater schools overseas. Like, I was seriously considering joining Mount View at one point. But then I looked at the curriculum, and it was like a semester of Shakespeare, and I was like, oh my god, like, do I actually want to go overseas and do like, I guess, more European or like Western theater? Like, not really. My interests really do lie in more local theater, or theater that's more culturally relevant to where I'm living, which is like Singapore, right? Because I feel so strongly about like our arts policies here. So I was like, okay, I don't want to do 4 years more of like theatre, and I also didn't really enjoy getting graded on theatre, right, when I was in SOTA. So I was like, okay, maybe not that. So since I didn't know what I was going to do next, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a gap year. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to work. But then I got my IB results back. So I did the IB in SOTA, and I didn't really do as well as I had hoped. I think in hindsight, by international standard, I actually didn't score that badly. In Singapore, because it's like SOTA, it's ACS, the standard's kind of like, oh, 40 and above, and like everybody wants like 45, which is like full marks. It's like supposed to be like achievable, and my year actually did pretty well. Like we had quite a number of like above 40s or like above 42s. I felt so terrible about myself, and I felt like, oh my god, I'm not gonna get into any university, so all the more I need to like go out and get work experience to like bolster my portfolio when I apply. But I was thinking like maybe I should just try and apply anyway, but I still didn't know what to apply for. So I was like, okay, I was thinking about it. I was exploring a couple of options. I at some point actually even considered like a business degree, which is like ridiculous in hindsight. I definitely would have died in a business course just because I'm so bad at math and I do not find any joy in it. But the reason why I was considering a business degree was because at that point I was also very actively running this social initiative, which I will get into like in a later episode of the podcast. But I was very deep into running my social initiative, and I was actually thinking about ways that I could come to monetize it. I wanted to stay like in a sense like non-profit, but then earn money from like different streams. So I wanted to know like how I could go about doing that, because I know that's something that like I think my aunt did. So I was like, okay, maybe I might want to check out like a business degree, but I just didn't feel passionate about it, you know. So during that downtime when people were like busy applying for university, I was just, you know, doing my own thing, like working. I was doing like the commercial stuff like I already mentioned in the previous episode. Now I'm going to get into like how I actually found my uni course. Okay, so that's all like the introduction. Now I'm going to get into how I actually found my uni course, and it's such a strange story because I actually found it through this guy on Tinder. Surprise! So I'm actually going to do like also a different episode on dating apps like at a later date, but I'm going to give you guys a story as like a teaser, okay? If you like this story, you got to listen to the later episode on dating apps. I was like swiping on Tinder one day, and then I saw this guy's profile. Let's just call him B. I came across his Tinder profile, and it just looked like a regular profile. Like if you look at the photos, it's like, okay, whatever. But then I open up the profile, and his bio is like, oh, working on my graduation thesis this year. And then he starts like listing all the different things that he's considering doing, and they're all related to politics. And he's like, oh, like swipe right if you have any interest in any of these like topics, and we can like chat. I was like, okay, like that's unique, because most of the time it's like, oh, love dogs, don't swipe right if you don't like dogs, or like, oh, I love bubble tea, like that kind of thing, right? But this guy's like full out like, this is my dissertation, like help me. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna swipe right, because I was also actually interested in topics. I think some of it was like Singapore politics related, which is obviously something that I was interested in, but I don't know why I had never considered going into like political science. I guess it just felt like something like so normal to me, that it was just something that my family and I would talk over like dinners, or I would talk about with my friends over coffee, but I never thought of it as something that I wanted to actually study, right? So then I spoke to him. I was like, oh, like your thesis topics like sound really interesting, like can you tell me more? And so we chatted about it, and I was telling him like, oh yeah, I'm kind of thinking about like applying, but I don't know where to apply, so I might just take a gap year first. And he's like, oh okay, like you seem kind of interested in political science, like why don't I send you all of my year one political science notes? You can have a look and see if it interests you. So he sent me the notes, and I basically read all of it in like one night. It was like seriously like a light bulb moment. Oh my god, this is exactly what I want to do. This is exactly what I love. Like I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier. In my mind, like when I was looking through all the political science notes, it was never even just like, oh okay, I'm interested in political science. Like I knew right from the get-go that I wanted to look at politics and the arts, because I think growing up, my parents and I would talk about politics and like current affairs very, very often. And so it was something that I was like interested in, but I never really took like a super big interest in it until I entered SOTA, and then I started doing like theatre tech contents that were discussing like social political issues, and then learning about things like art funding, art censorship. And then that's when I really like started to get my own interest in like politics, right? So when I looked through the poli science notes, I was like, oh, okay, like I want to look at this and the intersection with the arts. So that's really essentially like how I got to studying political science. When I found it, I just knew that this was what I wanted to do. But at that point, I was kind of still thinking that I wanted to take a gap year because I guess I had already like in my head prepared to take a gap year, and a lot of my friends were actually already like in the midst of applying, right? So I was kind of like in a sense late to the game. At the point that I realized I wanted to do political science, like it was just I think a couple of like 2 weeks away from the Yale and US applications closing. So I was like, shucks, like should I even try? I scraped through, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna try and then see if I can get in given my grades. So I tried it, and then I got the acceptance, and I was like, oh, shucks. Now the problem is, I'm afraid if I don't accept the place in uni right now, if I try out next year, I'm not gonna get it. Like maybe this year they just happen to be like, oh, okay, like even though her grades aren't that good, like I guess we'll just pass her, you know what I mean? So I was like, okay, am I willing to take that risk? Do I want to continue with the gap year, take the risk that I might not get it next year, or should I just like count my blessings and go in this year? And then also it's like, what school do I want to go to, right? NUS obviously has the most, in a sense, prolific poli-science department, but hearing from my friend who was in SMU, like it seemed like he also got a really good education there. And then do I want to go to NTU, which is like so far away? So actually from the get-go, I had kind of crossed out NTU. I was like, oh, I'm not going to go there. It's super far. I don't want to go to Jurong. No way. But I also didn't want to go to NUS, to be quite frank, because NUS doesn't let you specialize immediately. You have to go through the FASS route, the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, where you have to like take a bunch of different courses. It's a little bit more like general liberal arts education before you specialize and pick your course, like I think like year 2 or so onwards. I was like, yeah, I really don't want to waste time on anything else. I know I want to do politics, so I really was not keen on NUS. So NUS was actually my last choice, and SMU was my first choice. But I didn't get selected for SMU. So I was like, oh, shucks, okay, what am I going to do? So I got the confirmation from NTU, and they were like, okay, there's like a welcome tea ceremony. No, not really ceremony, it's just like a welcome day for prospective undergrads. So I went in because I hadn't gone for any open houses at like NTU or anything. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go in and check it out. I went there. It was nothing special, honestly. In fact, it was actually kind of bad. Like, I went there and I sat in on like the first presentation, which is like, oh, welcome to NTU, like congrats on your confirmed offer. But I distinctly remember sitting there and thinking, this has got to be like the most ratchet ass uni ever. Because on one of the slides at the welcome presentation, it said like, oh, what to expect from university, but university was spelled wrongly. It was like UNVI. Why would I go to the university that can't even spell university, right? But then after that initial general like welcome, I went for the PPGA presentation. That's Public Policy and Global Affairs, so they don't call it Poli Science in NTU. And it's a relatively new program. I was like, okay, this program is like new, but they had a lot of different course offerings under the 4 Poli Science umbrellas, which are comparative politics, public administration, international relations, and political theory. That made me feel like, okay, I don't know what it is exactly in Poli Science I want to do yet, so it's good to have like a lot of different options, right? And then I could later on choose which one I wanted to focus on. It sounded good to me. And then after the talk, there was this like allotted time where you could speak to some of the professors. So my friend B was there with me, where I was like, oh, okay, like which professor should I talk to? And he's like, okay, go and talk to like that Taiwanese professor. He seems like he'll tell you the truth. So this professor's name is Chang'an. So I went up to him and I was like, hi, I actually have a really specific aim when I want to come into studying political science, and I wanted to look at the intersection between arts and politics. Do you guys have any courses here, like any modules here that will allow me to pursue that? He gave me a really honest answer, which I'm really grateful for. He said, honestly, no, there aren't any arts politics modules here, but what you will find is that it's really flexible. In our modules, you're going to be able to, I guess, carve out that space for you to look at the arts, even if the course itself is not about the arts. You can do like political theory, you can look at public admin, and then see how you can bring the arts into that, like through your own research. I had really appreciated at that point in time that he wasn't trying to like upsell the university to me. He was just very honest, like, no, we don't have that, but you can make that happen. And so from that conversation, I had a really good feeling about NTU. And that was actually, that very specific conversation was the thing that made it click for me, where I was like, okay, I'm going to NTU. So then I accepted the place in NTU because I was afraid that I wouldn't get in if I tried the next year. And true enough, just the very next year, it became a lot more difficult to get into the course. So I'm grateful that I went in at the time that I did. What Chang'an said was true, actually, because I think in the later years, like year 3 onwards, when you start taking like the higher level mods, things that are not so foundational, not so introductory, the profs gave me a lot of free reign to kind of write about whatever I wanted, as long as I could relate it back to the course, right? And then I also realized very quickly that I had a very deep interest in political theory, and the professor Christopher Holman, who taught that, is like basically one of the most open like professors in this area, right? Like he basically says, write whatever you want for your final paper, as long as you connect it back to whatever we have studied in the course. And it didn't even have to be like the same theorist. It could be a different theorist, as long as you can sort of like write about something similar. So that was how I got to studying political science in NTU. Now that you guys have the background into why I went into NTU and why I got into PPGA, let's get into how my uni experience was like. So like I said, I really loved uni, and I think I owe that to a realization that I had very, very early on in my uni life. And I don't even really remember how I got into it. I think it was just being met with that much flexibility in arranging like your timetable. And then it totally hit me. I was like, oh, uni life is whatever you make out of it. I think it's so different when you are in your earlier years, like in primary school, secondary school, JC, whatever. It's still very much fixed, especially in like the Singaporean education system. It's a very fixed curriculum that you go through. Even though the IB awarded me a lot of freedom in terms of what I wanted to like research about, ultimately there was still like this fixed amount of subjects that I had to take, even if I hated it. Like even if I was bad at math, even if I was bad at science, and even if I knew I wasn't going to continue using it once I entered university, I still had to do it, right? I still had to write all these like dumb essays about math and chemistry. I hated it because there was just so little flexibility, and I just felt like it wasn't going anywhere because I knew I wasn't going to use it like in the future anymore. When I got into uni, I realized that although there are certain requirements, for the most part, there is a lot of freedom, right? Once you kind of clear all the requirements within the first year and a half, you're kind of free to direct your uni education any way you want. So there was a lot of freedom, not just in how you wanted to arrange your schedule, but I guess also what you wanted to do like with all the extra time, because it's not like a 8:30 to 5:30 p.m. schedule anymore. It's like, okay, maybe 4 days a week, like 2 hours a day, and then you've all this other free time. So I was like, okay, it kind of seems to me like I can direct my uni life however I wish. And because I realized that so early on, I knew that there were certain things I wanted to do with my time. And that was to take a lot of courses that I was actually personally interested in, and then use the remaining time to work to pay off my uni fees. Because I was paying my own uni fees, and that's like $40,000 for the whole degree, I felt the pinch every time I took up a module, right? Because I'm essentially paying a big sum for that module. Like every module is $800 to $1,000, something like that. So I knew like if I'm going to be spending $40,000, it better be on something that I like. I'm not going to take ridiculous modules or like stupid modules just to get a good grade. And I also think that not scoring well for IB actually did me a world of good, because it made me realize that you could not score very well, and it's actually not as consequential as everybody wants you to believe. Like, it's not as consequential as the education system has kind of like taught me, right? I scored 36 out of 45, which is like supposedly not a good score, but I still got into a course that I really wanted to. I still got into my top choice, and I still felt like I was going to get a really good education. So I was like, okay, maybe grades don't matter that much. And I really drove myself crazy during the IB period. Like, I would not eat, I would not get up from my table just to like cram, and I still didn't do well. So I was like, clearly something's not working out in the way that I was doing it. And I knew very distinctly that I wasn't doing well because I didn't like what I was studying. When I went into uni, I was like, okay, it has to be things that I want to do. If I got into this course that I wanted, and I knew that I wanted to study political science, then it has to be the way that I want it. So obviously, you know, to a certain extent, you kind of have to like grit your teeth and get through the compulsory mods. But then beyond that, I'm free to choose whatever I want. With that in mind, I was like, okay, I'm not going to go in for the grades. Obviously, the grades matter in some way because you still want to be like employable when you leave. But also, I was told very early on in the first 3 weeks by this professor who is now like a really close friend, Professor Walid. So Walid told me very, very early on, like, actually, as long as you graduate with like a second upper and above, like you're fine. So it doesn't have to be like first class. One tier below that is also fine, right? And I thought that I'm pretty sure that if I choose the modules that I like, I would be able to achieve that 4.0 very, very easily. So because I had this mindset, I think it made uni just so much more enjoyable right from the get-go. Went in with the mindset thinking that, oh my god, I get to study something that I love and I get to do it however I want. And so going into class every week was honestly a joy. Like, I just felt so happy to be able to do something that I wanted to do. And I knew that at the end of all these like ridiculous compulsory mods, that I would get to actually study what I really, really wanted to and get the education that I wanted. And then also I was keeping in mind what Chong'an said to me at the welcome day, which was, you can carve out these spaces for yourself to research the things that you want. So I was like, okay, that's where I need to get to. I'm not gonna just like bumble my way through uni, squander $40,000 and then not get something good out of it, right? When I went through my first year of classes, I did it very, very consciously. I need to kind of like be able to make mental notes of what of the classes I enjoy and what I don't enjoy, or what kind of content I enjoy and don't enjoy, right? I think the 4 introductory courses that you have to take as a political science student is Intro to Political Theory, Politics, Public Admin, and then Intro to International Relations. Very intuitively, I realized that I loved political theory. I loved reading all like the different texts and then getting straight to kind of like the heart of every single issue, like going back to basics. I loved that. I enjoyed introduction to politics. I guess it's like basic, right? I did not enjoy international relations. And I guess when I wanted to find out what I didn't enjoy, it wasn't enough to be like, oh, okay, I don't like this. It has to be like, I don't like this because. And why I didn't like international relations was because I felt like the theories we were learning were way too broad and way too outdated for the kind of interactions that we were seeing between different countries or different states at the point in time that we are studying, right? Because all these theories are like kind of old, which is not to say that they're not useful. It's just that I don't think they're expansive enough. So because I was able to identify this, then I spoke to my professor. I said, yeah, I don't really like IR because of this. And then he was able to tell me, okay, these are like the 4 basic IR theories that you need to know. But if you move on to the higher levels of IR, you will find that new theories have been developed, new theories that are a lot more detailed, new theories that respond more to like current day developments like social media. With that in mind, then I knew like, okay, moving up, I have to continue to take some IR mods to get a better sense of whether I actually like it or not. So I wasn't just about to say like, okay, I don't like it and therefore I'm never going to take it again. And then the last one was Intro to Public Admin, which I also didn't really like, but acknowledged that it was important. I didn't like it because it felt like very banal. It's like, oh, okay, like here are the 12 rules to bureaucracy. We're just like, oh, okay, it's kind of boring. But again, in the same way that I didn't want to shut off IR, I just basically didn't want to shut anything off too early, right? This came with an acknowledgement that like the introductory mods are just really introductory. Like you're not getting deep into the topics yet. So like I didn't want to make like a snap judgment. So moving forward, like my next, I think year 2 and year 3, I really spent taking kind of like an equal load of all 4, even though I knew that political theory was the thing that I was most interested in. I think it helped that there's only one political theory professor in NTU, so it's not like I could spend all my credits on political theory, but also because I had this mindset of like, okay, I need to get the most out of my education. Of this $40,000 that I'm spending, I have to make sure I'm getting more or less like equal or like proportionate amounts of all these different facets of politics, right? So with all of that in mind, when I moved into year 2 and 3, I started to then take higher level modules for all 4 facets of political science. So that would include things like advanced theories in IR or more specific topics in public admin like budgeting or like media. And then I also took things like comparative politics in Southeast Asia. So all of these really gave me like a breadth of information. Like I learned a lot about many, many different issues, and it helped me close in even more on what I was interested in. I think throughout the 4 years, my constant interest was still in the intersection between arts and politics. That never waned, but I think studying more about different things helped me to really close in on how it was that I wanted to approach arts and politics, right? Because arts and politics can take on many, many different forms. It can be arts and political theory, so that will be looking at like aesthetic theory. Or it could also be arts and public admin. That's looking at like maybe the budgeting that goes into arts policies. It could also be like comparative politics. So you could totally take on a comparative lens when you're looking at arts policies from like different states. So the more I took all these courses, the more I was able to zoom in on my interest. And I really do recommend this, like if you're in uni or if you're heading to uni, which is like not to shut any doors too quickly. And when I made that decision, I knew that it would come a little bit at the expense of my uni grades. Just because like right from the get-go, I was just not that good at things like public admin because that requires a lot of rote memorization. I was also not very good at IR just because I was not that interested in it, right? And it's just a natural thing for me that if I am interested in a topic, I tend to do a lot better. So I took things like American foreign politics, and like I at that point knew nothing about American foreign politics. Like I knew a little bit about American politics from like the news, from pop culture, but I didn't know anything about like foreign policy, the way they dealt with other countries, right? And a lot of my friends actually discouraged me from taking it at that point in time because they were all like, oh, okay, and this advice came even from seniors. They said don't take courses that you like have no idea about because you're gonna be going up against other people who like seniors or other people in general who just already have more information than you from the get-go, and you're gonna lose out because of the bell curve. I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, but if I kept that in mind, then I would only be doing the things that I knew I could score in, and or things that I knew that I already had knowledge in. And it's like, why am I spending $40,000 to not learn very much at all, right? And I think for the most part, like I would score like A's and B's, and it affected my GPA for sure. I mean, it didn't affect it very drastically, but it still does have an effect on your GPA, right? That's just how the GPA system works. It's very like unforgiving in that sense. But I really don't regret it. In fact, looking back at my transcript, I'm really proud of myself that I took such a wide variety that I never shut anything out very early on. And I think this is something that a lot of people did in my course. And I think this is the most common in like political theory because the intro course to political theory is not very easy. It requires a lot of readings, and it requires, I guess, a set of like critical thinking skills that isn't really like utilized very much in like other stages of your education prior. So a lot of people would just take the one political theory mod and then never approach it again. And when I ask them why they don't take it, the immediate answer is always like, it's too difficult. Sometimes people would even say like, oh, it's actually really interesting. I actually really like the professor, but I just can't score in it. Like I would get like a B minus or like a B. And to them, that would be like not a sacrifice worth making. But again, because I had this whole thing of like, uni is whatever you want it to be, I was like, okay, I don't want uni to be about just my GPA. I want uni to be about what I'm learning and what I'm getting here that I can't get anywhere else. So looking back at the like variety of mods that I took, I was really happy with it. And I feel like I walked away with a poli-science education that was very, very holistic and expansive. But what I'm also trying to say, right, is that you kind of have to balance between your interests and your GPA. You're bound to not be good at everything. And sometimes you're just going to be in a situation where you really want to study something, like you really want to take a module, but you know that you're just not going to do as well as other people. Maybe just because you don't have like a natural knack for it, you don't have a flair for it, whatever. So for example, when I was in my like last year, we would basically have to finish like 4 level 4 mods, so like 4 of the most difficult level mods in your course to graduate, right? So I took 2 level 4s in political theory, both of which are very, very difficult because every single week you read one book. So it takes a lot of time, right? But then in order to counteract that, I took a different like public admin mod, which is a public leadership, which I knew just didn't have as many readings. The workload was a lot lighter. So was I really interested in public leadership? Like, no, not really. Like, it's fine and useful, I guess, but it's not exactly like my top choice, right? But sometimes you just gotta make like the smart decisions. But I think the wrong way to go about it would be to like, okay, I'm just going to take all the easy mods. I know everything about these things. They're all fluff, whatever. I'm just going to get it and then get like a high GPA from that, right? I mean, that's not the uni experience that I wanted, at least. I guess go through the journey like consciously, right? Like make notes of like what you like, what you don't like, and then kind of think about what you want to get at the end of this uni education. Is it really just 4 years and 40K that you're going to squander on like easy mods just to get it over and done with? Or is there something like, is there a bigger project that you're like keen on exploring? And speaking of bigger projects, like because I knew that I wanted to do arts and politics, and then I realized like around year 2 that the way I wanted to approach it was through political theory. I then went on to take as many political theory mods as I could. And with every political theory mod, we would write like a final paper, and oftentimes the final paper would be open in a sense, like you could write about anything you wanted as long as it related to the course. So I took every opportunity to write about the arts. And I also flagged it up to my prof like very, very early on. Like, this is exactly what I'm interested in. What can you recommend? Like, what do you think is the direction that I can go into if I want to write about this? So, for example, I'd be doing like a module on like democracy, right? Democracy and division. And most people will be like, I don't know how you can relate arts to that. Like, democracy is like procedural, it's like voting, things like that. I myself like kind of had like some ideas, but they just weren't really formed up yet, right? Because I didn't have the right vocabularies to approach it. So I would just like tell my professors from the get-go, like, I'm interested in the arts, like, what can I do with this? So my professor was able to tell me like, okay, if you're interested in the arts, like, maybe look at these theorists because they've written some works about the arts role in democracy, or like how arts and democracy are related. And I went to read those things, and then that gave me kind of like the tools I needed to start thinking even more about it and start kind of like thinking about my own questions and about my own essays. So that's another thing that I think I really, really took away from this uni journey, was just like the ability to have like academic freedom and realizing that it's so important to have like a direction. And when I say direction, I don't mean it in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to plan out like every single semester right from year one. Because when I entered in year one and I attended this like PPGA talk by the sub club, they were like, okay, here's like a study plan for you guys. Like every single sem, like these are the mods that you should be taking. Like you should be taking one level 1, one level 2, and then in this sem you should be taking like 2 level 4s. And like it really stressed me out. I was like, oh shucks, like is that what I have to be doing? Like I have to start like planning that early? I didn't do that. It's just not me, I guess. Like at that point in time, it just wasn't me. So I really took like every semester as it came, and I adjusted according to like my GPA at the time, according to my interest at the time. Like, to be honest, like I very, very little planning went into it. I would have to plan at the start of like every semester, obviously, but I didn't think that it was useful to plan like a year ahead, 2 years ahead, 3 years ahead. It just didn't make sense to me, right? So when I say to have direction, I don't mean like to micromanage your study plan. I just mean to have direction as in like, what do you want to get out of this uni experience, right? Which goes back to like the bigger point I'm making again, that your uni experience is whatever you want it to be. In order for that to realize, you also need to like kind of put in a bit of like groundwork to kind of figure out what it is that you want out of the journey. So besides all the PPGA mods that I had to take, you obviously also have to take electives, right? And in NTU, you have a certain set amount of electives that you have to take, and you can put the electives into just any elective you want, or you can choose to specialize in a minor, and then half of those electives have to be dedicated to your minor. So the maximum number of minors you can have is actually 2. So it's like half goes to one minor and then the other half goes to the other minor. I was initially considering doing a minor in Soci and Philo, but then I realized that if I did 2 minors, I wouldn't have any electives left to take other mods, like art-related mods, which was very, very important to me. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go with one of the minors, because I also felt like I was getting a bit of like philosophy from my political theory mod. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do the sociology minor instead. And a lot of people ask me, like, is a minor necessary? Is it useful? I mean, to be honest, like a minor isn't that necessary. Your future employer is not going to be like, wow, like you've got a minor. I mean, it might be a conversation point. It might be a little bit useful, but it's not going to be like the make or break, right? I would say that if you're doing a minor just for the sake of like the certificate, like it really doesn't matter. Why you should do a minor, however, is if you actually want to learn a little bit more about the topic, like genuinely. And I think that's the use that you get out of it, right? Like, I feel like I sound like a broken record at this point in time, but because I knew from the start what I wanted to do, I knew that a sociology minor would help the bigger project. So I did the sociology minor. I declared it when I was in year 2, and the benefit of declaring it is that you get some priority to bid for the modules that you want. So you have to take 5 electives to make up the minor. So I did Intro to Soci, Singapore Sociology mod. I did 2 mods on theory, so like classical social theory and power, politics, and the state. And then the last mod was a mod in gender and sociology. Right? I actually was considering giving up the minor after taking the first 2 modules because I really didn't enjoy it. But then I got the grade back, and they were both A+. And you see, this is what I'm saying, right? That sometimes you just gotta be a little bit smart about how you choose to approach your modules. Like if something's giving you like A+, and I really didn't put in that much effort for the minor. I mean, I worked hard. I should definitely work hard, but I definitely wasn't like slogging for that grade, right? So when it came back and it was A+, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I have like an aptitude for soci. I'm going to give it like one more chance. So I did the classical social theory mod, since that's very in line with my existing interest in political theory. And I was like, oh, okay, it's not bad. It's not as good as like political theory, but it's okay, I guess. So then I got the grade back. It was an A plus again. So I was like, okay, I guess this is working out for me. I gotta clear the electives either way, and I'm already like halfway through the minor at this point. So I'm just gonna do the 2 more and then call it a day, right? I'll just graduate with the soci minor, whatever. Ultimately, do I regret taking the soci minor? It's a yes and no. In some ways, I do wish that I had gone ahead and done the philo minor instead of the soci minor, just because I ended up feeling like the sociology department and the sociology students did not possess the rigor that I wanted. I felt like the profs went very, very easy on the students, and as a result, the students then slacked off. I don't know, I just went into every class feeling like, why isn't anybody doing the readings? Because when I went into like PPGA mods, definitely more than 50%, I would say like 80% or 75% of people would have already done the readings or already had enough background knowledge to be able to engage in a very rigorous discussion that I would take away from every single time. But then I would go into soci classes and I would be like the only person who had done the readings, or sometimes people be like, oh yeah, actually I didn't even watch the lecture. And it's just like, I don't understand. Like, you guys are paying so much money for this. Why wouldn't you put in any effort? So I was just so frustrated with the sociology students and staff. I mean, like faculty. That's why I kind of wish I ended up going for the philo minor, also because I ended up having such an interest in political theory that I think it might have been beneficial for me to go into philo. But I will say that I think the sociology minor equipped me with a very different set of lenses to look at politics and arts and the world around me. The everyday things like gender issues, social inequality, economic inequality. So for that, I'm grateful. And for that, in that sense, I don't regret it. I think sociology does equip you with a very specific set of lenses that prioritize not just things like, like numbers or like policies, but really just the sentiment on the ground, the sentiments of like a community, for example, or even going as granular as how one individual is affected by it and how that leaks into like a community and how that leaks into like a state, for example, right? I think it has definitely shaped the way I think about more everyday issues. So in that sense, I don't regret a minor at all, and I would definitely recommend doing a minor. I could have also just taken like 4 soci electives and then not declared a minor. So yeah, I mean, take it however you want, because the minor itself doesn't really matter. You can really take it in any direction you want. So besides the soci mods, I also made sure to take a good amount of like art modules. That included like a mod on arts as commodity. So like talking about the art market, which was so interesting. I think that one focused a little bit more on fine arts that you would see in the museum, for example, or arts that you see like being sold at Sotheby's, which then also gave me like a very different set of lenses to look at the arts, right? Because I think that's something that is not often talked about, like how do we price art, or like why are certain contemporary artists like Damien Hirst able to charge like so much for their art? Is that art ethical? Why are artists like Banksy so popular? And even though he's like completely anonymous, like how does he bypass certain like art market standards, right? That was very, very useful. I took like a module in Introduction to Theatre. Even though I had already done like 6 years of theatre education, I still took a lot away from that. Like there were certain topics that weren't covered in my 6 years in SOTA, and I met a really great prof. I also ended up doing like a research project with him where I looked at the effect of theatre on multiculturalism in Singapore, because multiculturalism is such a key tenet of Singaporean politics, right? Racial harmony, social harmony, things like that. Again, because I already knew from the start that I wanted to do arts and politics, I was then able to very consciously look for these avenues, be it in the modules or even in like extra things like research projects. So I did this thing called Eureka. So that was what I did the research project under, which is like this special like module that is offered to like I think top 20% of each cohort for you to be able to like clear some of your modules or like your electives through working on a specific research essay. That in many ways was a stepping stone to the graduation thesis that I eventually ended up writing. Number one, because it sort of gave me a taster of what kind of research I wanted to do, whether it was qualitative or quantitative. it was also useful for me to identify, like, okay, when I'm doing this short research project on arts and politics, what else do I want to write about, or what is it that I enjoyed out of this process, right? And so from that process, what I realized was that I wanted to be able to focus a lot more on theory. That's number one. And then what I liked was that I was able to speak very specifically to the Singaporean political climate and how the theatre affects that directly. So I did that, I think, in like late year 2 or early year 3. And then when I finally got to year 4, because I had already taken all these different mods, and because I was so consciously workshopping this intersection throughout the 3 years prior, by the time I got to year 4, like, the thesis idea came to me so naturally. I didn't even like have to rack my brains. It was like a combination of everything that I studied before, plus what was going on in the news, which was like all these art space closures like Center 42, Substation, the Necessary Stage, Intercultural Institute. And I was like thinking of all these things. I was like, how can I bring all of these together? And then it hit me immediately. I was like, this is what I want to write about. I want to write about all these art space closures, what that means about arts policies, and what this says about politics in Singapore. What's like the future, right? I told my prof, I was like, this is all the things I'm interested in. Can you lead me to the resources for me to get like a clearer idea of what I will be working with? So he gave me a bunch of different theorists, a bunch of different authors, and then I spent like a couple of months reading, and then I had also already done like a lot of readings from the mods before, right? So I was pulling from all these different avenues, and then it just naturally came to me like, oh, okay, this is going to be my graduation thesis project. And I think in comparison to a lot of my peers who had a very difficult time deciding on a graduation thesis topic, for them it was more of like, okay, now I have to do this essay. What is the thing that will be least painful for me to write about? Or what is the thing that has interested me most in the last 4 years or in current affairs at the moment? And because of that, it became like quite a chore, right? Because then you're working on a very tight timeline between like the start of the term to having to submit your proposal, having to look for a supervisor. Like you just have such a short window to decide on all of those things. And then because you have such a short window to decide on those things, when you decide it and then you start working on it, you're like, oh shucks, actually I don't really like this. Or actually I wish I had done something else. I wish I had more time to think about like what it is I wanted to do. Because now I'm doing this thing and I actually don't really want to do it, or there's something else that I could have like pursued instead. Because I was workshopping this literally right from the moment that I entered university, it came to me so naturally, and it was like in my gut, I knew that that was what I wanted to do. There was like no flicker of doubt in me. And as I continued working on it, like doubt never arose in me because I just knew. And when I say I was workshopping it from the moment I entered, I don't mean like, oh, right from year 1, I was thinking like, what am I going to write for my FYP? Like, no, that wasn't the case, right? It was just that I knew the direction in which I wanted to go. And then obviously as I took more modules, that kind of like developed, right? And I think in a strange sort of way, it's a lot like dating. Like, you know, when you date around, you're kind of like dating people and then learning about yourself. Like, oh, okay, this is what I like in my partner, or this is what I don't like in my partner. It's kind of like the exact same thing, right? When you're doing modules, it's like, okay, this is what I like writing about, this is what I don't like writing about. And so by the time I reach year 4, I know what to avoid and what to move towards, right? And I think that also comes with, again, taking all these varieties of mods, right? It's like, just like when you date, you want to try going out with a lot of different people so that you know what's out there and what you can select from, right? If you're just dating like one type of person, then your whole worldview is just gonna be like, okay, this is all there is for me, right? So if you're just taking one sort of module, all you're gonna have in mind is like, oh, okay, this is how to think about it, or like, this is what I can work with. When actually there's so much more you can do. It's just that you didn't explore. And I must say that I was like very lucky because I build very good rapport with my professors. And I think this is the thing, right, that a lot of Singaporean students don't understand, which is that you don't have to like suck up to your prof for like participation marks. It really doesn't matter. I think when I entered uni, I was so eager. Like I was genuinely eager. I was like going to class, I was so excited every single time, and I wanted to talk to profs because I genuinely wanted to learn so much more from them. I had so many questions and I wanted to like get to the source of it, right? So who better to ask than the professors that are teaching me? I think profs really appreciate it when students are passionate, right? I mean, you're not just going in like, okay, like give me the rubrics, I'm just gonna write the essay, like here you go, I'm gonna check all these boxes. Like, I mean, that's kind of boring, right? It's really easy to tell when you have a passion for something, and it's just so much more enjoyable. when you have passion for something, right? And it benefits you. Like the energy is like infectious in a way. Right from year one, like because I had all these questions in mind, like I would talk to my profs, and my profs were very, very, very welcoming. They were very supportive. At no point did any prof tell me like, oh yeah, like who cares about the arts? Like I would say like literally 95% of my cohort mates would be like, oh, like why so obsessed with the arts? Like who cares? Like arts is not even related to politics. Like arts is not important. I was like, no, that's not true. Like that's not true. And I talked to my profs about it, and my profs were always like, yeah, you're right. Like there is an intersect, and it is not studied enough. Like that is something you should look into. And then they would direct me to all the ways that I could continue doing that. And I remember very early on, I had this conversation with Walid, about university, about the arts, about modules. And I often like to say that Walid is like kind of like the first friend that I ever made in uni, because he was one of those people who was so supportive. He kind of like made me feel really encouraged, because by week 3 I had already met all these people who are like, let's gonna go in, get the grade, get out, I don't really care. And then I would go to class, I would be literally dressed like how I'm dressed now, okay, and be like, oh, like why you dressed like that? I'm going for a fashion show. And I guess it's like NTU culture for you, right? Because everything is so like insular, everything is all kept within this like little island that is your school. People just show up to class in like FBTs and like school t-shirt, and so if you like dress up a little bit more than that, people are like where are you going? I would literally have people come up to me and be like, oh, like why are you dressed like that? Are you going for a fashion show? Are you going to Paris? And there was one time, one of the girls actually came up to me and was like, oh yeah, like why are you dressed like that? Like, are you going to Paris? And then while I heard it, and it was like, why are you like picking on her for what she's wearing? Like she doesn't look at you and ask you if you're going to the market. And I was like, oh, like wow, he really went there. Like, and I was like, wow, like this prof is like, wow, he's cool. And then I remember also that he invited Yaqub Ibrahim to come down for one of the classes, for the students to get to ask him questions, to hear like directly from somebody who was in politics, right? And I told Walid like before the class, I was like, I want to ask him questions about like the art scene here, because he was a minister for the Ministry of like Culture and all that stuff. I was like, I want to ask him about the arts. Like, is that okay? And Walid was like, yeah, go ahead. Like, of course. That gave me like the like encouragement I needed to be like, okay, I'm just gonna literally make what I want out of this experience. Like people can like make fun of me all they want. People can say like, oh, it's not relevant. But if I'm interested in it and I'm getting the education that I want, then that's all that's important, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm the one paying $40,000 for it. Like you're paying the $40,000, but you're not paying it for me. So why shouldn't I get what I want out of it, right? It's like if you buy something at a store, if you buy like chicken rice at a store, and then they give you like Hokkien mee, you're gonna be like, what the hell? I didn't ask for this Hokkien mee. I want chicken rice, right? So it's the exact same thing, except that a plate of chicken rice costs like $4, and my uni education costs $40,000, right? So it's like, of course I'm gonna demand for exactly what I want. Okay, and since we're on the topic of like cohort mates, I'm gonna get a little bit into like the friendship aspect of uni. And I think the exact same principle applies, right? It is whatever you want it to be. You can go in there, you can like make all the friends you want. Like you can have like 100 friends from hall, from pageant, from your course, from like and it's like, okay, yeah, if that suits you. But I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do. Like I was like, no, yeah, this place is not for me. Like I'm just gonna go in for a class, I'm gonna head out immediately. I don't want to get into any like social politics of uni life, that kind of thing. No, not for me. And then how I actually came to find like my later friends was just through this one friend who I knew from church, who I wasn't friends with prior, but we were in the same like cell group because we were in the same course. We were both in PGA. So I was like, oh, okay, can I like join you for lunch, whatever. I have like some time to kill before the next tutorial. So I joined him for lunch, and then that's how I ended up making like some of the friends like later on. And then leaving uni, I would say like I just have like a very small handful of friends, which is like fine by me. Like honestly, when I went ahead and like took mods, I never really planned to like take mods with friends. Oftentimes I would actually just sign up for whatever mods that I wanted, and if I did it alone, like that's fine with me, because like none of my friends wanted to do political theory, to be honest. So I knew like I had to go at it alone, and that was fine with me. But I do still think that it was like important that I had this small group of friends in uni. Like I thought I wouldn't make any friends at all, but I was wrong in that respect. I mean, I didn't go ahead and make like 100 friends, but I think a small group of friends to like support you and to take that journey with you is really, really important. And so the guy that I met like through church. The turning point where we became friends was in year 1 when we were both taking the political theory mod, and he was like really falling behind, and he was like, oh, do you mind sharing your notes with me? And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, here, have all the notes. And then for him it was like, oh, like he was really surprised because what he had heard about uni was that it's like a dog eat dog world because everybody's graded on the same bell curve, like nobody's gonna want to help each other, everybody's gonna be like selfish about their notes. And I mean, to be honest, I heard the same thing, and I had actually experienced the same thing myself. But because I knew that, like, okay, this is not about GPA for me. I don't care about the bell curve. That's out of my control. I was like, yeah, of course, here, have my notes. Like, I wasn't even really friends with him at that point in time, but I was like, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not going to harm me if I give him the notes, so you can just have it. It's fine. That was like a philosophy that I took at every single point in my uni journey. Like, anytime anybody needed notes, like, they could have it. I just didn't really see a point in, like, gatekeeping it. It's just whatever. It doesn't benefit me at all. I think that is also another way, right, in which uni is whatever you make out of it, because it can be totally competitive. But I think that kind of like just makes your life really hard for you to go into every mod thinking like, oh, I need to beat out like all these people so that I can get an A plus and I can beat the bell curve. Like, you're just making things so miserable for yourself, right? The very last section of this episode today is going to be about my uni fees, how I paid that off, because that's something that a lot of people ask me about. And for context, if you don't already follow me on Instagram, I managed to pay off my uni fees when I graduated. So I graduated like debt free, and I didn't have to pay any interest on the loan that I took, which is something that I was very, very happy about. I was very, very proud of. Honestly, getting to pay off that lump sum of like uni fees felt even more rewarding to me than my GPA. Like, it felt more rewarding than going up onto stage and then collecting my certificate or whatever, my transcript. I don't even know what it is that I collected, to be honest. I got the folder, I didn't even open it up. I was like, oh, okay. I was fully like not going to go for my convocation. But I decided like 24 hours before that I would go for it. And if you're interested, like there's going to be a vlog up on my like YouTube and my Instagram. You can find me at Chia, MEGGYCHIAAAA, that's 4 A's. And then you can hear the story of like why I didn't want to go for convocation and then how I decided to go in the end. So I managed to pay off $40,000 by the time I graduated. And this was something that I really wanted to do even as I entered uni in year 1. Like when I entered uni in year 1, I was like, I have to graduate debt-free because I don't want to pay any interest on my uni fees. And at that point in time, when I entered uni, it seemed like a very plausible thing to do because I was earning a fair amount from commercials and the frequency of filming was also very, very high. So I was like, okay, this seems like a manageable amount to do by the end of 4 years. Sadly, COVID hit somewhere in the middle. It was lockdown, sets were not up and running, commercials are not being made, and then even after COVID, the rates for TVC talents, like TV commercial talents, was just so much lower. I guess because clients, even government agencies, like didn't want to pay as much anymore. So I was like really fully freaking out for a big fat moment. I was like, oh shit, like how am I going to pay off my uni fees? And everybody around me, my parents, my close friends, they were all like, don't stress yourself out. Like it's okay if you graduate with like a debt. It's super common. It's more common than you think. But I was just so stubborn, right? Because like from the start, I knew that was what I wanted to do. And like when I get my head like fixed onto things like that, to goals like that, it's really hard for me to like unfixate. That's just how I am, right? For context also, I was on the DBS tuition fee loan. So the DBS tuition fee loan pays off 90% of your school fees while you are studying, right? Because every single semester you have to pay your school fees to the school. What DBS does is it pays off 90% every single semester for you to the school directly. And then the other 10% you pay to the school, or if you're like on a bursary, then the bursary can cover like the 10% on me, like a small amount of that, right? So every sem I would have to pay about $500 to $600 to the school, and then DBS handles like the rest of that. Whatever that they pay for you while you are studying, the 4 years of your education, it's interest free. So you don't accumulate any interest on it until after you graduate. So in June or July of your graduation, the interest starts to kick in. And the interest is whatever the bank interest rate is at that point in time of you graduating. When I graduated, it was like 7 point something percent, which is very, very high. It's very, very high, right? So I was like hell bent on not accumulating an interest. I just think that interest is so stupid. I know that it comes with debt and I know that it comes with loans, but I just hate it. I just didn't want to pay any more than $40,000 for my university education. I was so stubborn about that. And then with the loan, you have like a 20-year repayment period. So you can pay it for like up to like 20 years. And every month you have to pay at least $100 if you're not going to pay it right at the time of you graduating. So because of all the issues that I was facing like in the commercial arena, which was like at the point my main source of income, I was like, oh, like, okay, it seems like I'm not going to be able to pay off the $40,000. I was very, very blessed. I think I really scraped together that $30,000 in the last year and a half of my time in uni. So I was having like pretty much like a year-long breakdown, like over like what I was going to do with the uni fees. And then in the last year and a half, like things really picked up for me, not in commercials, but in social media. If you've been following me for a while, circuit breaker was kind of the period where my TikTok started to grow. My Instagram also started to grow alongside that. If you want to find out more about that, you can listen to the previous episode 2, where I get into that a little bit more. But because it started to pick up and because TikTok was such like a new platform, clients were really willing to like, I guess, take a gamble and like invest in it. And so in the last year and a half, I pretty much earned the entire $30,000 that I needed to pay off my uni fees. So I graduated with no debt, no interest accumulated. So I paid like a flat kind of like $40,000 for my uni fees. I share about this very openly on Instagram, but the reason why I didn't want to dedicate a whole episode to it, even though people have asked for that, is because I don't think this is like the most conventional source of income for a lot of people. I really have to admit that being able to accumulate all that income in such a short period of time was also very specific to the time period that we were in, right? Which is when TikTok was like just starting out, and then I also had like this early movers advantage on TikTok. Everybody was like locked down, couldn't do much. TikTok was booming. There were all these factors that led to me being able to do that, right? So I didn't think that it needed like a whole episode just because it's not like super importable, you know what I mean? But I mean, I'm gonna share anyway in case it helps anybody. But yeah, I think if you're looking into like tuition loan, if you're paying it on your own, definitely look into like the bank loans that are available because those are really helpful. I cannot imagine if I would have been paying $8,000 a semester across the 4 years because there were like highs and lows, right? There were certain periods of time where I was earning more money through commercials, and then there were certain periods of time where I was not earning any money because of COVID. And I think this also like lends itself to like this bigger point, which I've kind of been like alluding to this entire episode. It's really, really difficult to make plans super far ahead of time. I think it's prudent to make some plans ahead of time, but I also think that it's prudent to not commit yourself to plans too far ahead of time, right? At the point in time where I was applying for my tuition loan, I was earning quite a fair bit of money from commercials, so I was actually thinking of investing with the bank. Given the income trajectory of like the last year, it made sense for me to do that, and it seemed like I would have enough money to support that alongside paying for like the 10%, and then I would like end up being able to pay off that 40,000 at the end of that as well. But because of COVID, there was this period of time where like I was not earning any money, and it was very, very scary. And had I got hit with the investment thing, like I would have been really screwed because there is like a penalty for not putting in a certain amount of money every single month for this like investment account. With like my uni plan, my uni curriculum, had I planned 4 years ahead of time what I was going to do, I would never have stumbled into all the different like modules, the different minors, the different options that I could take that would have led to a really holistic education at the end of 4 years and to like research papers that I was really, really proud of. So I guess what I'm trying to say is plan ahead of time. That's fine. But don't like force yourself to commit to that plan because things change so quickly. I think everybody has sort of like felt that, right? During COVID, you could have like had plans to like go overseas, you could have had plans to like change your job, but all of a sudden everything is like put on pause because of this like unprecedented event. So yeah, I guess we can round up the episode on like 3 main takeaways. Number 1, don't commit yourself to plans too far ahead of time. Number 2, uni life or like school life is whatever you want to make out of it. And number 3, approach uni or school or whatever like consciously. Don't just go through the motions of it because you have to. Like if you're already stuck in this position of like, okay, I need to get a degree, I need to go to school, like what are the ways that you can make the most out of it? What are the ways that you can carve out a space for yourself that is like uniquely yours and is something that you relish in and like develops you outside of like all these other boundaries that are put in place like GPA, compulsory mods, things like that. So I hope all of this was useful to you guys. I'm really glad that I got to share a little bit more about this because I've always tried to like share it like on my social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, but just really doesn't award me the space to like get into as much detail as I have in this episode, right? Let me know what you think of these like little takeaways, of the little anecdotes that I shared today. Let me know on the Instagram or the YouTube. That's Back of the Party, BACKOFTHEPARTY. Drop me a DM, a little comment. Always open to hearing you guys' thoughts. You can also let me know what you want to hear in like future episodes. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to drop us a little follow on whatever platform you're listening to the podcast or watching the podcast on. Don't forget to share this with your friends on your Instagram stories. It really helps me to get the word out, helps me to produce more episodes for you guys. We're available anywhere you listen to podcasts: Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Thank you very much for joining me at the back of this party. I will see you at the next party. That's 2 Mondays from now. We release every other Monday at 8 p.m. And till then, make school your own party. Bye, guys.